Hi guys, thanks for clicking on the video. This is part 3 in the series of videos where I put my new Victory VAP arrows together. So in the first video you watched me weigh everything out and make sure that I batched it all so that my arrows are as consistent as possible as far as their weight's concerned. In the second video you saw me install the pins, the nocks and the wraps. And in this video, I'm going to be installing the points and then also fletching the arrows. So I've still maintained everything as far as the weight consistency is concerned. So starting at the top of the groups of 3 fletches that I've got here, arrow 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13. The reason why there's no 7 is because if you watched that other video, you would have seen I ruined the wrap, but it happens sometimes. And then my points are all here in order as well, from 1 through to 13, from left to right. So I am aware of which bits still go with which arrows to make sure that the weights at the end turn out as well as they can. So one of the things that I did was I put a poll up on my Facebook page where I asked people what their opinions were as far as what I should use to glue in the target points. Now, by a big margin, people were choosing the hot glue method. So it's low temperature melting point hot glue designed for use in putting arrows and things like that together. The reason why it's low temperature is because you don't want to be overheating the carbon in your arrows, or even the aluminium if you're using aluminium arrows. So because that can cause degradation in the structural integrity of the arrow, which can then cause to failure when you shoot it and things like that. So we don't want that because it's a little bit too dangerous. So because of the votes that you guys did on my Facebook poll, I'm going to be gluing my points in with the hot glue method. So I have my candle here ready to go. It's a nice vanilla candle borrowed from my wife as usual. Got my hot glue ready to go. My points are here, arrows. And then the other thing that I'll be doing in this video is also setting up this fletching jig for these arrows. Now the arrows that I've fletched with this the last time I used it were a larger diameter, so it's not exactly lined up correctly. And I'll show you guys how I do that as well. So I'm using the Bitzenberger as usual. It's my favorite fletching jig. And without the upgrade that you can get for it, you can still get excellent results if you take the time to make sure that you set everything up correctly. So I'm going to get the camera a little bit closer so that you guys can see what I'm doing when I glue my points in, and then I'll also show you how I set the fletching jig up so that it's properly suited to the diameter of the arrows that I'm using as well. Alright, so I've got everything that I'm going to need in order to get this done. I've got the point in my left hand, the arrow that I'm going to be putting it in I'll put down here so that I can grab that with my right hand when I'm ready. My hot glue's here as well, and the candle's ready to go. So one of the things you've got to be aware of is that you can actually burn the hot glue by getting it right in the flame. So try as best as you can to keep it close enough to the flame that it starts to melt, but not so close that it starts to burn. Now because I'm using a candle, it does put out a bit of soot, so you're going to see a little bit of black on the glue and on the target point as well. I think what I'm going to be doing is starting the glue sort of back here, about 2/3 of the way down the shaft, and putting it all around the shaft, working my way towards the back end. That way when I push it into the arrow shaft, the glue will run its way up towards the pointy end of the point, and I should get minimal squeeze out if I'm not using too much glue. Now another thing to remember as well when you do put these into each other is to turn the target point as you push it in, because that'll spread the glue around more. So what I usually do is I'll turn it, push it down, bring it back up, turn it the other way, push it down, bring it back up, turn it back that way, and push it down until it seats. And all the squeeze out is going to be around the seam where the point and the shaft touch each other. Let that dry completely and it will just roll off with your thumb. You won't have to get a knife to cut it off or anything like that. It'll come off really, really easily. So let's do that. So I've got the glue, holding it close to the candle. Like I said, you'll see a little bit of soot coming out of the candle, because that's what candles do. Just hot enough to start the glue melting. So the glue's nice and melty. Now I'm going to start putting some of it on the point. And I find when it starts making these strings like that, it's gotten to the point where you're not going to get any more glue on the arrow. So if you want more glue, heat your hot glue up again, and then you can put some more on the arrow shaft. And when it makes those long strings, I find if you roll them around each other, it breaks that off quite neatly, and that's ready to go. But you'll notice that now that's all turned white, which means that it's not going to fit into the arrow shaft and it's not actually going to do its job. So the next step, get your arrow ready in your right hand or left hand, depending on whether you're left or right-handed. Grab the target point and heat that up again. And what you're looking for now is basically for the hot glue to turn transparent again. And that's when you know that it's melted enough that it's going to make it into the arrow shaft without any issues. So remember, you're paying attention to how much heat you can feel in the target point between your fingers that are holding the target point. And then once all of that's gone transparent again, as you can see, if the camera will focus. Now see, that's already started drying. So you've got to be pretty quick about it. We'll get some more heat on there. Make sure that that starts to go clear. Once it's all clear, grab your arrow, push it in there, and spin it back and forth. As you push it up, you'll actually feel as the glue starts to dry, it gets harder to spin that arrow point. So we've got a fair bit of squeeze out there, which is fine. As I said, once that's completely dry, and you'll know it is because that'll go white, you can then roll that off the end of the arrow and it won't be an issue. So I'll do another one. I'll try and make sure that the camera angle is good so that you guys can see exactly what's going on. I'll get my arrow shaft, have it ready over here. Take the target point in my left hand, that's ready to go. Grab the hot glue and start to melt that. Once it's melted enough that some of it's going to come off, basically smear it all over the target point. It's already got a little bit too dry. It is a pretty cold day here in Adelaide, if I haven't said that already. So we just got to keep trying to make sure there's enough heat in everything as we do this. Now I want a little bit more glue on there, so I'm going to remelt the end of my hot glue, put a little bit more on there, and now I've got to make sure that the glue that's on the point stays melted. And you'll know, because if the glue starts to turn white, it's gotten too cold and you won't be able to push it into the arrow. So make sure that that's all nice and melted. And when you're ready, push it into the arrow and spin it as you push it in to make sure that you get good glue coverage. So that's another one done. Basically now we rinse and repeat until we've got all 12 points glued into the shafts. So getting the excess glue off of the arrows is actually very easy. All you need to do is take your arrow and start pushing the glue up towards the point, and eventually it just pops off into this nice little glue donut like that, and you're left with a very clean installation job on your arrow itself. So just show you guys again, way too much squeeze out on this guy, but all you do, push the glue towards the point, it comes off like that, and you're left with a nice clean installation of your arrow point. So I'll do the rest of these and then we'll start looking at doing the fletching jig setup. So I've got my Bitzenberger sitting here on the table, and as you can see I am going to be using the straight fletch. I did mention that before because I think that these tiny little vanes are not going to give me enough of a helicoil if I try to use the helicoil jig. The next thing I need to do then is adjust the position of the magnet carrier so that when the clamp goes on there, the base of my fletch is touching the arrow in the right spot so that I get good contact between the base of the fletch and the arrow itself. Now the way that that's done on the Bitzenberger is you have these two rotating adjustment knobs, and they are locked down by these two Allen key head screws. So if you have a look, if the camera will focus, once you rotate these, you're moving the whole magnet carrier to the top or the bottom of the screen, and you can make the same adjustments at the bottom, which basically means that the whole thing is completely adjustable. Now the next thing you need to do then is make sure that the arrow is in the correct orientation so that the spine alignment is maintained when you stick your vanes on. So with the Zenith upgrade for the Bitzenberger, it makes this a lot easier, but this particular Bitzenberger has been adjusted so I find the easiest way to get this set up is to actually take an arrow and place it in the jig, making sure that the rotating knob at the bottom, which spins the arrow around, is in the correct position so that you maintain your knock alignment with the spine alignment marks on your arrow shaft. So I'm pretty happy with where that is. The next thing that I do then is take one of the fletchers and I put it in the clamp at the position that I want it to be. So in this case I'm going to be going right at the bottom of the clamp, and then taking that clamp, placing it on the magnet like that, and basically touching the base of the clamp to the barrel, running the clamp down towards the arrow shaft. Now you can see there, hopefully, that the fletch is not making contact with the arrow properly, which means that I then have to do an adjustment with this rotating knob to get the fletch in the position that I want it to be in. And I'll rotate the bottom one at the same time because I need to move the whole fletch over. So once I'm happy with where it is, I'll grab the Allen keys again and just cinch down these screws. Not super tight, but tight enough that when I let go of the magnet carrier, it's not going to float out of the way. Alright, so basically now, if you have a look, you'll see that the arrow's making good contact with the base of the fletch. And if we look at the other side, if we can, So I'm pretty happy with the contact that my vane is making with the arrow shaft now, which means I can cinch these down properly to make sure that they're not going to move, and then grab my glue out of the fridge and start sticking these vanes down. So I'm going to go grab the glue. I'll be back in a second and I'll show you guys what I do there. So jig's all set up. This is my glue of choice for fletching, Loctite 401. I've used it for a very long time. I've never had any problems with it. In fact, I've used proper arrow fletching glues and my vanes have fallen off, but the 401 seems to do a really good job. One of the most important things, in my opinion, as far as your glue is concerned when you are fletching, apart from obviously using a very good glue, is making sure that the nozzle of the glue bottle is clean. If you've got excess glue hanging off of that, you're not going to get a good bead of glue running down your fletch, which means that you're going to either put too little or too much, or it's going to go where you don't want it to be, or anything like that. So basically a clean glue nozzle with some decent quality glue is what you want. And then what I like to do is I like to just squeeze a drop like that and then pull the drop all the way down the side. Try not to squeeze too much glue out, and hopefully, if I can get the camera to focus again, you can see that there's glue all along the vane because it's nice and shiny. So then what I like to do is place the clamp on the jig like this. And this is kind of tricky because I'm doing it backwards for you guys. And then I move the base of the clamp down to touch the barrel at the bottom before I've actually made contact between the vane and the wrap. Then I make sure that I push the base down and I sort of roll the whole thing up like that to make sure that I get good contact all along the base of the vane. So the Loctite 401 does dry pretty quickly. I like to give it a couple of seconds, maybe about 10-15 seconds before removing the clamp. So we'll give that the appropriate time. While that's doing that, I'm going to actually go and grab some cotton buds. And the cotton buds are just to make sure that we get a good clean installation of the vanes. Any excessive glue, once it starts drying, is going to leave like a white haze on your arrows. That's probably been long enough. When I remove the clamp, I always open the clamp first and then slide it away like that. So one thing you can do now, grab something flat that you can use to push down on the base of the vane, just to make sure that the whole base of the vane is making good contact with the arrow. So then we move on to the next click. And once you bring it around, you can have a look down the vane, and if there's any excessive glue, you can wipe that off with your earbud. But it looks like I put just enough on that one, which is good. What I might do is bring the camera around to my side so that you guys can see what I'm looking at while I'm fletching as well. So here we have our finished product. It's looking pretty good in my opinion. $11 more to go. So we want arrow number 1. Make sure the spine alignment is correct, twisting that around a little bit. So then we take our clamp, we take a vein, we put that in the clamp, grab the glue, put a little drop of glue, drag that down the whole vein so that we get good coverage. Hopefully you guys can see there's glue all the way down that. Then put the clamp on like that. Make sure it's touching down the bottom here and roll it onto the shaft like that. Grab your earbud, get rid of the excess glue like that, and give it 10 seconds and we can do the next vein. What I'm doing here is that sometimes your veins are not perfectly flat on the bottom, and you'll notice that even with your flat clamp and everything else being lined up correctly, the middle of the vein may not make proper contact. So I'm putting a light amount of pressure on the back of the arrow shaft to sort of bend it up a little bit towards the clamp, which then causes that to make proper contact in the middle. I know that it's making proper contact because I then see a little bit more glue squeezing out there as well. I can clean that up with an earbud, and basically from there open the clamp, draw it backwards, and if we spin it around, it's actually pretty clean on that side. So now basically it's just a matter of rinse and repeat. I'm going to continue fletching these arrows. I'm not going to make you watch the whole thing, and I'll come back at the end to show you what the finished arrows look like. So speaking of messy glue jobs, have a look at this. So you see the white haze on the arrow shaft there? That comes from using way too much glue. Now it does clean off with alcohol wipes or acetone or something like that, but ideally you want to try and avoid that from happening in the first place. So just an example of what too much glue actually looks like on your arrow shafts. So that's pretty much how I put my arrows together, and I did learn a lot while I was doing it as well, especially the bit about using the hot glue to put the points in, thanks to you guys replying to my Facebook poll. Now, I did shoot the arrows through the chronograph. My bow's set to 57 pounds. My draw length is 28.5 inches, and the arrows are 410 grains each, and they were doing 263 feet per second coming out of the bow. So I'm pretty happy with the speed as well, considering how heavy the arrows are. I did shoot them on the weekend as well, and I'm very, very happy with the consistency I'm getting out of them too. Sighted them in at Kidman on Saturday, and that didn't take very long at all. And then shot the first round of the 3D at TBC on Sunday, and the way that they were coming out of the bow, the way that they were hitting the targets, nearly shot a PB if it wasn't for the fact that on the second last target I had a massive beetle fly into my face as I was at full draw, which kind of put me off my shot. But that's part of it. When you're shooting outside, you can't always help what happens, and just got to wear it sometimes. So thanks for watching. Leave a like or a comment below. Remember to subscribe to the channel if you haven't already done so, and click on the little bell icon so that you receive a notification each time I upload a new video. I hope you all have a great week, and remember, just do good shots.